Good afternoon, viewers, and welcome to episode 3 of Straight Talk Debate. My name is Jemima Ndebele, and I will be your moderator for today's debate. Straight Talk Debate is a debate that hopes to engage high school learners on current affairs while testing their vocabulary and articulation styles. However, this is a little bit of an unorthodox debate, as the style of this debate is presidential, which means that we have two speakers from two different schools representing their schools, but only one speaker going to engage our audience. So, before we get into this fun debate, let me explain the technicalities. We have opening speeches that are 7 minutes long and closing speeches that will be 5 minutes long. So for the opening speeches, POIs will open at the end of the first minute with a single clap, and POIs will then close at the end of the 6th minute with a double clap. That means that debaters are then encouraged to engage the speaker and ask for points of information. Same applies for the closing speech, as the floor will open for POIs at the end of the first minute and close at the end of the 4th minute. However, we do not encourage constant disturbances, as we would love to hear what our debaters have to say today. Today we have two brilliant schools. For Team Proposition, we'll be having Combretum Trust, and for Team Opposition, we have St. George's College. But before we tell you guys what topic we'll be engaging today and what cometa of current affairs we'll be looking at today, let's go to a quick ad break. Welcome back, viewers. Now, I forgot to mention that since we are live on all of our social media platforms, viewers are then encouraged to comment the names of their favorite speakers today, as we have an ongoing Public's Choice Award that will be awarded at the end of the season, which will take place on the 25th of March. So we hope to see you guys here again, as we will then see who the Public's Choice was. Now, for the beginning of this debate, the motion for today is this House supports the Russian invasion of Ukraine. This news has been blowing up our phones and our notifications. And as poignant as it is, we do believe that it is important for high school learners to engage on these things, because they are, after all, our future leaders and maybe even our future presidents, hence the nature of this debate. So, for Team Proposition, we have Aurora, who will be the speaker for today. Please, guys, at your homes and wherever you're watching us from, please give a hand to Aurora.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I would like to call for a moment of silence for all the lives lost through this tragedy. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Aurore Lonyome, and I'm the first speaker for today's team. Okay. Let's imagine you are standing and there's someone next to you, and that person keeps on poking you constantly while denying the visible act that they are posing. Ladies and gentlemen, let us please admire the patience that Russia had throughout this ongoing poking for 8 years now. It has been 8 years that this has been ongoing, and Russia has demonstrated incredible patience throughout this time. If we are to observe closely, we get to see that what is causing this war is not so many things, just a couple of things which I will touch on in my speech. There is lack of integrity, okay? Let us please remember that over these 8 years, Russia has attempted to solve this matter in a diplomatic way. It has called upon Ukraine as well as the NATO organization to come together and solve this. To prove this, last year in December, President Putin he tried to reach an agreement with the US and its allies on the principles of the European security and the NATO non-expanding movement. But after all these tries and errors and all that, it has not worked out, and he has realized that the USA has an objective, or the NATO together have an objective to go for their interests and disregard Russia's interest in the process. They lack integrity. Integrity is one of the problems we face today because the NATO, as well as the USA, as well as Ukraine, has constantly violated the agreements on the NATO non-expanding eastwards. They have constantly violated this agreement. They kept on lying to the Russians. They kept on attempting to pressurize them and to even blackmailing them into not letting this thing go. And all this, what it has created is lack of trust and fear. The Russians feel threatened by the placements of truth near their borders, by the people that are constantly lying to their faces, people that are constantly saying one thing in the boardroom, and when they leave the boardroom, they say something else. The Russians feel threatened, and they urge them to please remove your troops near our borders, which they constantly and incredibly refuse to do. Moving on, we have to understand that NATO had an agreement to not expand eastwards, which it has violated this agreement for 8 years now, and for that, it's incredibly unpolite to have an agreement and then withdraw from it. Yes, sir?
I wanted to ask, do you think that NATO has been breaking these rules for a certain cause? Because it's been proven that Russia has been expanding on their military bases for the attack that they've been planning on Ukraine. And NATO has said before the reason they've been expanding in Russia's forces is to destroy these on-land nuclear weapons and missions that Russia has been trying to get towards Ukraine.
Basically, you're actually proving my point, the point I said earlier, that USA and its allies are only expanding for their own benefits to obtain the nuclear weapons from Russia. What are the nuclear weapons doing to them? The nuclear weapons are in Russia and in Russian position, and they haven't done anything with them. There is no valid point as to why they would want to expand towards Russia by using Ukraine and jeopardizing Ukraine's safety. We have to also acknowledge the two Russian populated states in Ukraine, that President Putin is willing to help them become independent because they have decided that themselves willingly they want to join the Russian Federation. And with that being said, it clearly proves that Russia has the intention to protect its people and protect its nation. And since the people and the countries that want to help constantly violate the agreements in place, it shows us that they lack integrity with their words and they cannot be trusted. That is why they are asked to retrieve and move back and move away from the borders. Okay. One more thing I would like to say. Yes, sir?
Do you think that Russia's nuclear threats over the years weren't enough cause for NATO to actually go against the statements they've made before? Not only has Putin talked about coming forward with not only the Iraq wars back then, but now he's already threatened to the US government that he would be implying forces onto their land if they try to interfere with what's going on in Ukraine.
Okay. This also goes to show how USA and its allies work. When France invaded Libya, on no grounds, claiming that they were planning an attack or they had this weapons in their possession. Nobody interfered. But when Russia is doing the same thing, they have to interfere. Russia never interfered with their business. Why do they have to interfere with Russia's business? It's not opposing any threat to them. Russia is basically telling Ukraine, we were a union, we were a Soviet Union. And when we left that union, we all agreed that we were not going to join NATO and we're not going to allow NATO to expand eastwards. And now that Ukraine has violated this act, it clearly shows that there is no legitimately or a legitimate or a valid reason for USA to join, to expand eastwards, because first and foremost, we need to understand that Ukraine is not even in NATO, it's not even in the NATO. So why would NATO come and interfere or come and support or come and try to save a country that's not even part of their organization? For all these reasons of lack of integrity, fear and threat to the Ukraine government, and all the lies that we've been told, I'm gladly proud to propose.
Quite an informative and eloquent opening speech there delivered by Ms. Lonyome. Thank you for that. Now we call upon our first and only speaker from Team Opposition to come and challenge our thinking a little bit.
I'm Cameron Fraser, and I'll be the only speaker for Team Opposition today. To start us off, I think we need to have a proper look at what the debate is actually about. We need to look at the fact that whether or not this is morally right that Russia is invading Ukraine as of right now. I don't think at all that this is a war. In my opinion, it's just a complete decimation. Compare Russia's forces to Ukraine's. I don't think this is fair at all. I'll now be looking on towards some sort of burdens that my house has to face. Ukraine does not stand, as of now, with NATO, like their first speaker did say. But NATO and Ukraine have wanted to expand together for some time now, and Russia has been against that for a while. And the fact that Russia is completely against NATO and Ukraine from merging shows a bit of fear for no reason at all. Ukraine will struggle to defend against Russia. If we look at the gunpowder and the manpower that Russia possesses, it's not fair at all. Ukraine is struggling. They've been getting support from other countries, but I don't think it's enough. I'll now be looking at some points that I think could be still made, but I don't think they will be. Team Prop could say that Ukraine has a lot of human rights violations, whether that's in custody or whether it's with other human rights in general. But I think Russia doesn't look at the fact that they aren't treating their citizens right at all. People die in custody all the time. There's constant aggression from Russia to their citizens. And overall, Russia acts as if they're all good and nice when they treat their people completely wrong. Now, if we have to look at when this war has actually started, it's since Putin was made president, all that long time ago. He's had an unhealthy obsession with Ukraine since the beginning. He thinks that Ukraine's independence was an accident. He said that multiple times on live television. Russia does not feel safe, according to Putin. He says that they don't feel safe because Ukraine wants to join NATO. This argumentation doesn't make any sense because NATO is a defense organization. So if NATO did ever attack Russia, it would be because Russia did something first. We also need, yes?
Do you believe that the war could have been avoided had Ukraine kept their promise to Russia?
Personally, no, because I feel like there were always different POIs from each country. So even if they had stayed aligned, there would have been issues later on. I would like to make sure that nobody forgets what Russia's done. Russia made the first movements. They made a bombardment on residential buildings, killing almost 800 civilians. How can we let Russia go completely unarmed, with just a slap on the wrist? It's kind of absurd if you ask me. Russia deserves the world to stand against them because right now they are currently in the wrong with how they are handling things. We are sending a bad message if we just let Russia off this way. Russia is taking things a bit too far, in my personal opinion. Russia is taking it too far because of how hard they're going on Ukraine by attacking the civilians. If you think about this, if we just let Russia do this and the world doesn't stand with Ukraine, what kind of message does that put out? The fact that they can just go and take land with whatever they want. I'd also like to take a point at one of the first speakers. They said how Russia is just trying to protect the civilians. I think this is false, because Russia's civilians are currently living in the worst economic climate the world has seen in so long. They aren't helping their citizens at all. Russia is simply just turning the other eye because they want control on Ukraine. I would like to think if Russia was really protecting their citizens, they would focus less of what's going on in Ukraine and focus on the human rights violations in Russia themselves and what they are doing right now to help their civilians. Thank you.
Quite a mind-provoking speech there from Team Opposition. I hope you guys are engaging, because I think this is quite a heavy topic, and in order to digest, we need a little time. So therefore, we'll be going on a quick ad break, but we'll be back right after the break with the closing speeches from Team Proposition. Sorry.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, welcome to another exciting edition.
Welcome back, viewers. I hope you've made sure to comment the name of your favorite speaker in today's debate so that in future they might stand a chance of winning the Public's Choice Award. So please do make sure to choose between Ms. Lanyome or Cameron Hill Fraser here. So guys, before we go and see, sorry, my apologies. But viewers, please do stay tuned as we go into a quick ad break again. Welcome back, viewers. Now we'll be calling upon Team Proposition's Aurore to deliver her closing speech.
Hi guys, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon again. Well, the first speaker of Team Opposition comes here to tell us about morals and all that. Well, I think we were all raised not to lie, especially not on a public platform as the USA and its allies did. So about that, you actually have to reevaluate your points before you say that, because USA, its allies, as well as NATO, even Ukraine, lied to Russia by saying they will not expand, but they have expanded and Ukraine wants to join them. So, yeah, okay. We have to understand, oh wait, the first speaker also said that Russia, Ukraine, something about the world against something. I didn't hear properly, but I knew it didn't make sense, so it's okay. We have to understand that Russia does not deserve the world against it. It really doesn't, because it really tried to be peaceful all these 8 years. Russia really tried to be peaceful, really tried to settle this in a peaceful manner. And what did the countries and the world do? They sat back and watched and thought he was joking. They didn't believe what he was saying. They thought it was jokes and everything. They disregarded what he was actually saying. Yes, sir.
Do you believe that Russia, and especially Putin, have the right to claim Ukraine, Latvia, and other countries that were broken apart after the USSR disbanded? Because as you're saying now, Putin, people don't have the right to fight against Putin as he's just trying to do a good thing. Yet again, these countries are independent and they have their own values.
It's not a dialogue, but okay. I will get to your POIs. I didn't say Russia has the power to claim Ukraine, but when we have an agreement, you are to abide to that agreement because you signed that agreement, and it is an agreement and it will stay an agreement because we agreed to it. We sat together and said, okay, look, we're not going to do this. So why are you turning back and changing the agreement by yourself and not consulting me? He talked about human rights. This is a war. Both sides are fighting. So human rights are being broken both sides, on both sides. So you can't pin it on Russia. We have to understand that when the nuclear power station was blown up in Ukraine, Russia and Ukraine came together to help Ukraine. Therefore, Russia is not some maniac trying to just blow up Ukraine. It tried. Russia tried. It really tried for 8 years. 8 years, dialogue after dialogue, agreement after agreement, betrayal after betrayal. Russia tried to settle this in a peaceful manner. Let me reinforce my point. NATO is a threat to Russia because once NATO is involved, it benefits only NATO. It will not benefit the country affected. If we look at Libya, Syria, all those countries that were invaded by these organizations, they were left with wounds greater than the actual impact of the war that they were facing. So we have to reconsider our options once we want to engage NATO into something that does not concern them. You can't come to my neighbor's house and, not even my neighbor's house, you can't go to someone's house and tell them how to rule their house. We have laws. There were laws, agreements between Russia and Ukraine. We agreed that you are not going to do this. Okay, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Okay, yeah, sure. We agreed on that. So you can't come here and tell me otherwise. Honestly speaking, this is even a dangerous point for Ukraine because if an organization that cannot be trusted, how can you trust them to help you? If all these years, what they've been doing is going after their own benefits. Ladies and gentlemen, with all these points and all my rebuttals that I made, and the little that Team Opposition had to say, I'm really glad to propose. Thank you.
Quite a heated and very intense closing speech there from Team Proposition. Thank you for that, Ms. Lonyome. Now we'll be moving on to Team Opposition, who'll be delivering their closing speech.
I would like to look at what they just said about a few things, actually. I noticed that they say this is a war. Human rights violations are being broken out left, right, and center. Just because both sides are breaking human rights codes, that doesn't make it at all right, and that doesn't make it at all okay. Just because the rules are being broken, just because he did this and I also did it, I have the popular saying, 2 wrongs don't make a right. Both parties should be held liable at this point, but we need to look at how much of a human rights violation Russia has actually been making. We need to look at the fact that Russia is harming their citizens so much, by such a large extent. They're going through terrible financial positions, the families are losing funds, and it's a struggle to survive. How are people who are not at all involved in the war being held liable by this, basically? Russia is being cut off by trade centers and left, right, and center, and some people just have nothing to do with the war at all. I have a question for the audience. Putin stated that Ukraine is by right a part of Russia. Why would it be killing its so-called citizens? How can you say that you're protecting your citizens and then call Ukraine your citizens by right and then go on by killing them? Putin has been turning a blind eye to his people. I think that's a very big issue that many people aren't talking about. Yes, Ukraine people are dying in the bombing, and that's extremely wrong. But it's not just Ukraine, and it's not just Russia suffering from this war. You say that it shouldn't be the world against Russia. But I think we need to look at the fact that this war is affecting so many other countries, because look at the oil rates going up. It's a huge thing that many people are currently talking about, the fuel prices. Russia claims that they are doing all of this in the good sake of their people, in the good sake of Ukraine's people. But I don't think they actually mean it. They say it by that label to try and stay good. Russia has already broken the General Convention by refusing to cease fire and harming innocent civilians. I'd also like to point out the fact that NATO only started expanding in 2016, but Russia made an invasion attack in 2014. So they, by law, broke that agreement first. I feel like that's an extremely important fact by saying that Ukraine started this all by violating the contract and the ideals, because we said this and they said this, and now they broke the rules. The fact that Russia made that invasion 2 years before Ukraine started expanding with NATO. I'd also like to put in the fact that Russia only really had an interest in this when a Russian president in Ukraine was put out of power. They no longer had that full power and control of NATO, of Ukraine, and now suddenly they wanted it back. The moral of this whole war is the fact that Russia wants control. They've wanted it for most parts of the world, and they're starting with Ukraine. Ukraine should have the right to join NATO, in my personal opinion, because if you look at the fact that Russia did violate the contract earlier on than them, they should be allowed to do it as well. Things change, generations change, a lot changes. There should be a new contract and there should be a new world. You also say that Russia has been trying to do this peacefully for 8 years now. Well, I don't think that's true. Russia and Ukraine have been at it for all of these 8 years, and I don't think Ukraine's been poking at them with the sticks, like as you say. I think it's a wrong example, and I don't think that Russia doing this is by any means at all justified. Thank you.
Quite a sentimental closing there from Team Opposition, if I might say so myself. So, viewers, as you can tell, this was a very, very close debate, and very, very close to our hearts, as this is affecting all of us worldwide. We'd love to know what you guys are thinking at the moment and who you think took this debate, because I for certain can't choose. Therefore, after this short break, we'll have an adjudicator that will present his findings. So please do stay tuned.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Abraham Angula, and I was your chief adjudicator for today's debate. So today's debate has the motion, this House supports the Russian invasion in Ukraine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys a summary of how the debate went, and then I'm going to give you my verdict as to who won the debate. So there's two main points of contention in this debate, which is firstly, what is the best for the country involved, which is Ukraine, and the second point of contention is then what sort of agreement is in place and whether or not it was violated, like basically whether or not the means justify the cause, which is happening at present. So what we hear from Team Proposition is, we hear that there's been poking going on for 8 years, and Russia's been very lenient with Ukraine, and there's a lack of integrity which has caused the war, and NATO and Ukraine have not yet solved the problem, which is there, but there's not really a clear indication of what the problem is. I think that's the biggest issue in the debate. Not really any explanation as to what exactly is the problem, how did we get there, or how certain things have any significance in this case. And then in the closing off of the speech, we hear that Russia says that Russia has a right over Ukraine because they are naturally their citizens, and they made a promise that they would never join NATO, and then that NATO has its own interest, and basically all they do is they're in for themselves. On the opposition side, we hear that Ukraine is struggling to defend itself because they're a weaker nation than what Russia is. And then we also hear that Russia is not helping their own citizens, so how are they going to aim to help the citizens in Ukraine? And then what they also tell us is that NATO is a country that defends people, or an organization that defends countries, so they wouldn't attack Russia unless Russia actually carries out an attack. So on the basis of this, firstly, as to what is best for Ukraine, we think that that clash goes to the opposition side, because they show you that, firstly, in terms of just the country in general, the country can't be protected, like Russia can't protect their own citizens, so there's no way they're going to protect citizens from Ukraine. But also on that, the Russians have their own interests, which are not vested in protecting citizens, but rather gaining certain things from the country. And then secondly, in terms of the agreement, on the opposition side, you hear that way before the agreement was even violated about the expansion into the east, Russia already moved in. So that already proves to you guys that even way before there was an agreement in place or something measured there, that there was already moving in. So that essentially in the debate shows you already that even in the absence of an agreement, there's some sort of vested interest in this nation. So that becomes problematic in an instance where you guys are supposed to POI. So on the basis of that and the deliberation I made, the debate unanimously goes to side opposition St. George's. Yes, thank you very much. It was a lovely debate, and good luck to all of you in your future rounds.
Thank you to our adjudicator, who was a former debater, former national team debater, right? And congratulations, team opposition. As I said, this was a very, very close debate, and I was privileged to watch brilliant minds go head to head. And I'm sure this won't be the first and won't be the last presidential debate you guys will be participating in, as I see a lot of politicians here. So, viewers, please do make sure to comment the name of your favorite speaker today for the Public's Choice Awards. And until next time, I'm your host and moderator, Jemima Ndebele.